get knocked down, but you gotta get up, keep going.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Sovereign CEO podcast. I have with me today Rachel Maurice. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Rachel and I have been working together for a little while here. She's one of our amazing Sovereign CEO members. Um, so, you are the unconventional MD. I love that title. You left the traditional allopathic medical system so that you can help people actually heal instead of just manage disease. For people that don't know you, can you explain maybe a little bit about you? How did you get into medicine in the first place? Did you like that at first? Did it make sense to you? And what was that moment where you decided, something's not really working here?
Okay, so I guess going back to my childhood, I grew up, so I'm Canadian born, and my childhood was pretty, I would say, traditional. I grew up in a middle class household. My father was a physician. My mother went through several careers, but one of them being a lawyer and actually nursing. And I think it was just encouraged to go through academics, like to achieve good grades. And I had more of an aptitude, I would say. I don't know if I would actually call it that now, knowing how the schooling system works, but I had more of an aptitude towards sciences, just because my grades were not that great in the English part, and which is subjective.
So normal. You
Yeah.
can't have both the left and the right side of the brain, I hear, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we could, but yeah. So I just, that sort of came more easily to me, and I just leaned more towards the sciences and ended up going into Bachelor of Science in university. And I actually did my undergraduate degree in microbiology and immunology, which has helped somewhat in what's going on in the world these days.
Mhm.
But through that, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was kind of looking. I did a lot of bench work, lab work, and realized that was not for me at all. I did not want to go into the research part of um, anything that I was going to do as a career. And I really loved working with people, and that kind of led me towards medicine. And I think obviously having a father who is a doctor kind of influenced me somewhat. So I actually applied right from university, although I wanted to take time off. My father actually encouraged me just to apply because it's always difficult to get in. So if I didn't get in, then I would have the time off anyways. I ended up getting in, but did have enough foresight to um, take the time that I had without any responsibilities of children and just any financial responsibilities, and make sure that I did a lot of traveling. And because being in medicine and becoming a doctor, the central banking system loves to throw money at you. So I had lots of ability to borrow money and use it when I could. So, yeah, I really think that I didn't understand what was going on in the traditional medical system when I went in. Again, science was just, it came easy to me. I found it very fascinating, the human body, how it worked. You know, we learned about the biochemistry of the body. We learned about the pharmacology, obviously, to manipulate the biochemistry, anatomy, and such. And so that really was, it was interesting for me and my brain. And I think that along with most people, I went into medicine thinking that I was going to help people. That was really my intention. And I think that's the intention of most people that really are in the system. It
Mhm.
is to truly help and support people. But I don't think, well, I know now the system is not set up that way. And most people who are still working in it don't quite understand that to the
Yeah.
degree that I do now. And I think a
And
lot
I
of
don't doubt that for a second, that like to take on this grueling educational process and to do this work and know how hard of a job it actually is, people have to be motivated by more than money for sure. It has to be driven by this desire to help people. But I just put a little pin in that borrowing money and having that available. I haven't really thought about that. Do you think that changes things for people? Does that put them, I don't know if it's putting them in a precarious situation all of a sudden because they have all this access to money. You know, you're promised like, don't worry about, like, soon you're going to be making lots of money. So you might as well take the credit. It's okay. You might as well live the lifestyle now. Do you see that changing intentions with a lot of people going into the system?
In intentions now, you mean, or back
I
then?
mean, not now, but I mean, they might like, do you see a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses going into this profession to help people? But from the practical side of, oh, all of a sudden I'm in a huge amount of debt
Oh,
as they take on the loans. Do you think that all of a sudden starts shifting goals and intentions in the profession?
yes, I absolutely do see that. And I think I didn't understand then what I understand now in terms of going into debt and really being like attached by a noose to be able to pay off the financial burden that you have, and really kind of grinding away and being on that treadmill of, what I saw for the last 10 years, just pumping people through the system. Like because I was an anesthesiologist working in the operating room, having, all the surgical procedures going through, and, not really wanting to be politically in the middle of anything, but it's hard not to in some respects when you're working in the system, and when you just see there are carrots that are given in terms of, if you have run this many procedures or cases through in a week, a month, 6 months, your hospital will get more funding. And then it would go to, well, actually, if you don't pump this many cases through, then we're actually going to take away funding. Right. So then that's where the system and the politics and the business leans on the people who are actually working in the system, and it puts you in a compromising position, right, to get
Mm.
things done, but you want to get them done properly, and sometimes things end up um, not working out the way that you would like them to, the way they ideally would be. And as well, just kind of going back to what you actually asked me, I
Mhm.
did see a lot of my colleagues really wanting wanting to process more people through, and taking a lot more extra time away from family, making sure that they were working to make the money to pay off everything that they had, the debts that they had gotten themselves, they had incurred.
Mhm.
And, before getting into medicine, but while you're in medical school and residency, you can easily rack up that debt. And then when you finish, there's this pressure or this societal kind of construct that you got to buy the house, the big house, the winter house, the summer house, all of the toys, the boats, the trips and stuff like that. And then knowing that you are, and I take myself out of this a little bit because my situation's a little different, but knowing that you're bringing in a lot of money, you have that capability with working, you have this mentality that you can spend more, right? And then it puts
Mhm.
you in this position of being tied to what you're doing, which again leads into part of the problem with what happened in 2020, and the situation that a lot of physicians were put in, I would say.
Right. No, that makes sense. I interviewed Brett Hawes recently too, and he was even mentioning, I think it depends on where you are, but even in regards to testing, if you go see like a natural health practitioner, like a naturopath, they're like, well, you're paying for it, so like let's test you for everything. Like, I don't really know what's wrong with you. Let's do all the tests. And I've heard in some Western medicine circles, you can't do that because if you're a little willy-nilly about like the testing, if you're not really sure that this person is already sick with that, you might actually get billed as the doctor instead of the system, and that can come back on the doctor. And again, I think that depends on where you are, but I've heard of that happening too. So doctors aren't testing early, they're only testing when they're sure that someone already is sick with that certain disease or condition.
Yeah, that would make sense. And I know, again, because I'm in a little bit of a different situation, being hospital based as opposed to
Mm.
office based, and me being the one ordering the tests outside of the hospital. But one of the things I do know that we were taught as a Canadian in the medical system was
Mhm.
to be very discerning what tests you ordered. And that was more, at least again, this was what I took away. That was more to the point where would that change your management of the patient by doing this test, right? Because you can just do a whole bunch of blanket tests, and just by the mere fact of how many tests you're doing, you are going to get some false positives. You're going to get some false negatives, some false positives based on the number of tests you do. So now you're kind of borrowing trouble when you start doing that, because now you're going to go down some some pathways that you might not have otherwise gone down or had to go down if you get these false positives or false negatives. So it's really using more your clinical judgment on what tests need to be done as opposed to doing, and I think in the States, it is more of a blanket test regimen.
Mm.
Although I don't know how it works with the insurance companies, but you can go pay for example, like a full body scan. Like I would never do that. It's something like $20,000 US just to go get a
Mm.
full body scan. But you're looking for trouble if you go doing that. Like I'm just telling you, they're going to find something, and then you're going to get put on the conveyor belt of
Yep.
a bunch of testing, whatever that looks like.
That makes so much sense. I've seen medical tourism. People are doing those full body scans, but in like Turkey, because it's very cheap to go and do it there. But that makes sense when you're looking at things like percentages. Like I've done lots of blood tests lately, and it's like 20%, 30% in between this range. It doesn't mean you have something, right?
Right.
You're right. It requires further investigation, which kind of reminds me of like this whole PCR testing too, right? You just keep testing everybody. Eventually, you're going to find that
Yeah.
everybody's sick.
Yeah.
But I went on a bit of a tangent there.
That's
What
okay.
what kind of medicine did you choose? You said that you worked in the hospital. What kind of lane did you choose, and why?
So yeah, I went and became an anesthesiologist. So I practice in the operating room, putting people to sleep, keeping them asleep, making sure they're alive still, waking them up. That's the biggest concern actually, is people thinking they're not going to wake up, which is, I guess it's understandable when you're not in it, but um yeah, everyone wakes up unless you're going in kind of going downhill, like you
Okay.
enter the operating room going downhill.
Okay.
But so I did choose anesthesia specifically. My year of medicine, when I was finishing my last year, was the first year in Canada that they changed the pathways, that you didn't all go and do a year of internship, which meant that you could become a GP. You kind of went through well, not every specialty because you couldn't, it was only a year long, but the general specialties. And then you would pick a residency if you wanted to do a specialty. My year was the first year that you had to actually pick a residency. So you went straight into a residency from medical school. So the fourth year, in my fourth year, we had a lot of lunch hours where specialists would come speak to us and talk to us about their lives, because choosing without kind of experiencing it is a little more difficult, obviously.
Hmm.
So that actually solidified my decision never to do surgery. And I tell you this because we had this 1 hour where 3 women surgeons came to speak to us. There was one plastic surgeon, one cardiothoracic surgeon, and one general surgeon. And the entire hour, all they did was try to one up each other on how fast they went back to work after having a baby. And I remember it shocked me because this one woman she went back to work 3 months after having the baby, and they were judging her for that. And she said, I was hospitalized. I couldn't help it. I couldn't get back to work any faster.
Oh, they judged her negatively.
Yes.
Like that was so long. Oh my God.
And the plastic surgeon went back to work 1 week after having a baby. And so for me, I knew that when I wanted to have kids, I wanted to actually participate in raising them and have them have me around. And so I just thought, if that's the kind of life that women surgeons feel that they um, have to have. That's not for me.
And the talk was about selling the lifestyle. Like you should be this kind of doctor because look at the lifestyle. And that was what they were hiring. You leave your
Well,
kids.
yeah, it was definitely a turn off for me. And so it really made me think what I wanted to do, what kind of specialty would fit the life that I wanted to have around family as well. So because I was also someone I liked doing procedures, I kind of found that out in my last couple of years of medical school. I liked working with my hands. I did like some amount of instant gratification. And so the combination, but I did like the thought process and the using my left brain and thinking. And so the combination of anesthesia, you have to know a lot of the medicine behind what's happening with the patient, but also in the operating room, you're doing a lot of procedures. And now I kind of cringe a little bit, use a lot of the drugs to manipulate the physiology and the pharmacology in the body. But it was a nice combination. And it also allowed me to work part-time, right? I could job share. I didn't have an office with overhead that I would have to keep paying if I were to take time off. As well, it was very portable. When I would leave work and come home, I left work at work. I didn't bring patient load home with me, so that when I was home, I was very present with my family. So there was forethought into me choosing it. So
That makes sense. My GP and our neighbor actually, he's an anesthesiologist for the same reason. Just in and out, need him for 20 minutes and then he can also see lots of patients that way too. Like it makes so much sense practically.
yeah.
Yeah. Now you told me something once about the ingredients that were inside that kind of shocked you.
Yeah, and I only learned, if we're talking about the same thing, I only learned about this from a new perspective recently, like within the last 6 months, actually, from a neurosurgeon that I've been following now for a couple of years, Dr. Jack Cruz, and the detriments of fluoride. I didn't quite understand just how problematic and harmful fluoride is in the body. And it's really kind of underplayed, I would say, by modern society, in particular, obviously, like the dental system with all of the fluoride in the toothpaste and fluoride when you go into the dentist for treatments. But fluoride wreaks havoc on the body. And I didn't put the pieces together, but the gases that we use to keep people asleep, as far as anesthetics, are called volatile anesthetics. And most people use them to keep people asleep. And the names should have kind of triggered me. But again, I didn't quite realize the harms of fluoride, but they all have an abundance of fluoride in them. So the names even give it away, like isoflurane, that's fluoride, desflurane, sevoflurane, well, the halothane isn't, but yeah, it's full of fluoride, and fluoride actually destroys the water networks that we have in the body. It does a whole bunch of things, but a big one is it destroys the water networks, including the collagen fibrils, which allows the free flow of information from cell to cell. And so it's
Huh.
really harmful to the body.
Is that why they say that there is an IQ drop in places where there's lots of fluoride in the water? Is it because of that connection piece?
I would say that is definitely part of it. Yeah.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say it's the only point. It also does something, it lowers the dielectric constant of water. But anyways, yeah, there are a few things that it does. But that is a big one that is problematic for people who go through surgery. And that is also why, if you have a red light panel or anybody understands anything about red light therapy, that is extremely beneficial to do postoperatively. So anybody who has to have surgery, because sometimes you can't avoid it,
Yeah.
using red light as a therapy before surgery and after surgery would be extremely beneficial, because it increases the water network in the body. It increases the bonding of the the water molecules and allows, again, for better communication between cells.
Hmm, that's wild. So, in order to go under, is there any way to avoid uh, getting just lambasted with fluoride, or is this just a necessary evil if you are having surgery?
Well, there is one way to avoid the gases, and I know if anyone who goes to an anesthesiologist now, they're probably going to curse me for saying this, but you can have an anesthetic without having the gases. It's called TIVA, which is a total intravenous anesthetic. And so basically what it is you are having an infusion of the drugs, the medicines to keep you asleep rather than breathing in the gases to keep you asleep. It's just more kind of labor intensive for the anesthesiologist,
Okay.
but it can be done. So don't let anybody tell you it can't be done. It actually uses the drugs, at least in Canada, that I'm aware of. Again, different parts of the world might have different medications, but the white one called propofol, if anyone is familiar with that, that is the one that Michael Jackson used to help him sleep, which doesn't help you sleep, but helped him stay unconscious. That
Okay.
is the one, that is the Michael Jackson drug.
No way.
Yeah.
Now,
As long as you're monitored, right? As long as you're properly monitored in the setting
yeah,
in the operating room, obviously it's not a problem. It's the way it was done with him that caused the problem.
yeah. Um, you know how some people don't actually go under? They're still conscious. My husband is one of these people. Does that have anything to do with the fluoride? Like, would this other treatment be better for him? Like we were in Europe together, and he used to snowmobile professionally. He had a really bad crash, shattered both of his jaws into a million pieces. So he's put under. And when he came to, he described to the doctor the entire surgery. He's like, you did this, and then this, and then this. He was also hallucinating and like seeing crazy things. But he's like, he didn't feel it, but he was aware of and knew exactly what was happening the entire surgery. And the surgeon's like, yep, that's exactly what we did.
So sorry, you asked if that was because of
Oh,
the fluoride?
because of the fluoride, and would this other treatment help someone like him who never fully goes unconscious when he's under?
So what I would say to that is it's really a multitude of factors. And every person is different in terms of how they metabolize the drugs, right? So they're trying to create more monitors to be able to see whether someone is aware or not. Um, for example, with open heart surgery, at least the way it used to be, because I haven't done any open heart anesthetics in a while, but when we did stop the heart and have the blood go through what's called like the heart lung machine, the bypass machine, the amount of gases would change. So we always forewarned the patient that they may have some awareness during the surgery because we can't predict how much is going to
Right.
be reduced, and everyone's different with their metabolic function, how their liver functions, how their kidneys metabolize things as well, excrete things, how much is going to be left in the system. So yeah, I mean, it could work better, but
Hmm.
again, it's one of those things that I was also very aware of. And so I made sure that I tailored my anesthetics to give people something that would make their memory foggy should that happen.
Mm, mm-hmm. Which is a wild concept too, right? When like with the drugs too, where you're not completely under, where you're told that you won't remember, but you are actually conscious during the
Mhm.
procedure. That one always blows my mind. I'm like, oh, so you're saying at one point I was suffering and aware of what was going on. I
Yeah.
just don't remember it now. That's so wild. Oh man. Was there a period of time where you really like enjoyed this work? You're like, this is good. I'm glad I did this. This is the peak of my career.
Yeah, I did. Right. When I first started, I mean, when I was going through the training, I really did enjoy it. And I thought I was helping people too. And, bringing compassion. And I know for example, when you do cesarean sections in the operating room, and again, this is something that I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe that I did this stuff. But when you have to have surgery to remove the baby, if there's a problem, right, with the baby, most of the time we try to have the mom awake. It's just safer for the mom as opposed to going to sleep, safer for the mom and baby. And so there's a connection, right? There's communication and support that you as an anesthesiologist, or one would hope that an anesthesiologist would give. And that was a role that I liked to take on. And I would get a lot of really nice feedback from women that they just felt so much more supported and calm and safe, with that connection. And I mean, the other part for me is, when the patient's asleep, I really enjoyed the dynamics and the conversations that took place in the operating room, depending on where I was working and who I was working with. Obviously, that made a big difference, but that was definitely something that I really enjoyed as well. So,
You mean with like the other doctors and
yes,
surgeons?
and
Yeah,
nurses.
yeah, that's cool. When did things start changing for you?
I would say that it was influenced by my going through a really long, drawn out, horrible divorce process that spanned over a decade. And it really took a toll on me mentally, physically, emotionally, and obviously affected, my work at times, right? Because you're then sleep deprived as well. Doing anesthesia, I'd be on call. And when you're on call as an anesthesiologist, it's not like a lot of other physicians where you can sit at home and wait to get called to go into the hospital. There's lists of emergency procedures. So you're in the hospital working, and oftentimes you'd be up all night or maybe get an hour or two sleep and get interrupted and get woken up again by like an emergency cesarean section or something like that. And so, work became work. And it was a lot more challenging because of the sleep deprivation and the emotional strain that I was under. And I enjoyed it, but it became a lot more work. And then really a big shift happened for me, sort of a small shift when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she wanted me to start researching different treatments outside of allopathic medicine. She was okay with surgery, but didn't want anything to do with chemotherapy or radiation. And I'm sure it had to do with a lot of stories I used to tell her, because going through the system and working in the hospitals, I'm going to see all of the complications that take place. I'm not going to see the healthy people, right? People who come to hospital are not the ones that are healthy. So my view is very skewed, but it really honed me in on making sure that I looked after myself, and that I made it a goal that I would never have to access the hospital and the traditional medical system if I never had to, because I didn't want what took place in there to happen to me. Not to say that anything was done intentionally, but complications are inherent in what's done in the hospital setting. So just to say that my mom obviously heard stories from me and didn't really want to have much to do with it. And so I started researching and ended up coming across obviously the nutrition world, which is just not taught to us at all in the conventional medical education. I don't honestly even remember 1 hour of it. I know lots of people talk about maybe having a few hours or maybe a day, but I honestly do not remember anything to do with nutrition outside of what's called TPN, which is the stuff that is given to a patient through an intravenous if they've had surgery and they can't take anything orally, right? That's the kind of nutrition that is taught in medicine.
Right.
And, it makes absolute sense that what you put in your mouth is going to form the building blocks of what makes up your body. So if you look at the hospital, what is being fed to patients, it's worse than, I was talking with someone else about this. It's worse than those TV dinners that we used to have, growing up, which I actually used to like, but it's so unappealing. It's not nutritious. There's no nutritional value in it. And then everything that's fed to, for example, the staff in the hospital, same thing, the greasy grills and just not nutritious food. And even people working in it, for example, I remember this was just so, I guess, impactful for me. I had just finished a case with one of the vascular surgeons, and he pulled out this massive clot from someone's carotid artery. And it was at lunchtime, and I think I was coming back, and he was walking the other way, and he was in his 60s. He had a bag of Doritos in his hand and a bottle of Diet Coke, and that was his lunch every single day. And I just kind of looked at him and I said, "You just pulled a clot out of someone's neck.
Yep.
And he just kind of said, don't give me the gears here." He said, "I get enough of it at home." But that's just to kind of emphasize how it's just completely overlooked in anyone's mind who works in traditional medicine. In
Why don't you think it's a part of your education, especially at this point? Like maybe we just didn't really understand. Like I know my mom's generation, it was about like all the convenience food and microwavables and like, isn't this exciting? Look how easy this is. And like they just really didn't know. We know so much now, and we're seeing this more in the United States with like Casey and Cassie. And I said that wrong. Casey and Callie.
Kelly, yeah,
Thank you.
me, yeah.
Um, we know so much now, yet I don't think it's changed.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. And I think this was what was really um rattling for me when I kind of, after 2020, a lot of things really started unraveling and unfolding for me. And the whole foundation of life, but starting with medicine, really came out from under me. And I was having trouble grasping it. But it goes back to the reason these systems are all in place and how they came about. Like our modern medical model is based on the Rockefeller system, which prior to that, medicine was about these natural holistic modalities that are now considered quackery.
Yeah.
And the Rockefeller system, like going back to the history of how, John D. Rockefeller ended up influencing the educational part of medicine, was to be able to use his, the leftovers or whatever it was from the oil industry, that the petroleum that, he was kind of, I guess, I don't know, put out of business by the government. And so he wanted a different way of using it. And he wanted to basically change the model of medicine to be pharmaceutically based. And tying that into, I guess, going back even further for nefarious purposes, wanting people to be sick, right? So it's a business model. It's really not a healthcare model. It's a business model. And when you keep people sick, then you are making money off them being sick. And we know that what's put in our food, or what we even call food, which isn't food, is making us sick. So the sicker we are, the more we'll have to access,
Yeah.
the business, and the more money these people make, who are the ones who are in control and running the business. I mean, that's really the short end of it.
And I doubt that anyone who listens to this show is listening to this and is shocked by this, but just in case, if someone's listening and is like, that's preposterous, they're trying to help people, there's no way this is sinister. A really clear example to me is diabetes. My dad has diabetes. Not once has someone talked to him about his diet.
Mm,
And he doesn't believe a word I say. And my mom still has, bless her, like she's a good wife, she's a beautiful mom. She's still giving my dad sugary things, or sometimes they have a lot of sugar-free things. And
yeah.
she doesn't understand the effect of insulin and how that can still have a response in his body. Um, so we just put people on medication and they're losing body parts, and we're not talking to them about, look, I know this is going to be hard, but like you have to be keto. You got to be on a meat diet, but it's more than that. I know it can be complicated, especially if it's type 1 or type 2. But my dad's getting zero nutrition consultation. That is wild. And we're surrounded by, I think, 8 different reserve communities here in Kenora, and diabetes is a big problem. And there are some very good people here that are trying to help people with this, like try and educate them on like, look, you can like eat some roasted chickens, like fill up on this stuff more than like this other, like we are seeing a little bit more of that, but it's
Yeah,
still pretty base level. And people don't know like some of these conditions can be reversed just with food.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you just look at the obesity, and I hate to say it, you know, everyone talks about you can't say that word, you can't call them fat, and you can't, you know, all this kind of thing, but it is a health problem, and obesity is increasing at an exponential level. So if we are truly helping people, how is it that obesity is increasing, which ties into diabetes, but ties into heart disease, ties into lung disease, ties into metabolic syndrome. And
Clarity is kind. That's what I believe. Like, yeah, being honest about these things can hurt someone's feelings. Hurting someone's feelings is much better if we get to keep them alive.
yeah, yeah. And the other, just I just kind of feel like I want to touch on this too,
Mhm.
is this idea of the exponential increase in cancer rates, right? That is something, again, if someone is saying that I think it was 1971 where Nixon declared, I think it was Nixon, was it Reagan,
Mhm.
that declared the war on cancer. If we are so advanced in medicine, how is it that the cancer rates are just skyrocketing,
Yeah.
right?
Even with the healthy people, I can think of people that I've known personally who are A-type people running marathons, like very, very fit. And maybe it was actually just their A-typeness and the stress that causes, because I know stress is so dangerous for us as well. And they ended up passing away from cancer. And of course, it could be from so many things, but it's not just like obesity. Like those people are obviously exercising and eating healthy. What else is it? Maybe they were stressed. Stress is a dangerous factor, but there's obviously something else in our world. I mean, I don't know how they were eating. Maybe they were eating lean, but it was toxic. I have no idea. But
Well, so that, if you're okay, that ties nicely into what I have been unlearning from my traditional education in medicine to what I have been relearning. And it actually really fueled my passion for learning and health and helping people, because we kind of started with the food. And I said, for me, that was really the door that opened my eyes to what health truly is and where it comes from. And yes, food is important. But again, Dr. Jack Cruz is someone who, he really started to crumble the foundation of my medical knowledge. And what I mean by that is stuff that I've talked with you about before, but it's really about light. And when we understand how the body works at a subatomic level, meaning below, like at a cellular level, but then even below the cells, when we have atoms, we have inside, we have protons and electrons and neutrons, and those actually are what are important when it comes to energy production in our body. And the signals for those parts of our body come from our light environment. It comes from all of the frequencies, the wavelengths that we are swimming in, that are invisible, that we don't kind of take heed to. And where this kind of ties in is, if you think about it, what's the difference between us being alive and, you know, a body that's alive and a body that's dead? Is energy, right? I mean, there's no two ways about it. It's energy. Where does our energy come from in our body? It comes from our mitochondria. So we really have to tend to our mitochondria, and that's not at all looked at in modern medicine. And the mitochondria if people can, if they remember back to high school, high school science, mitochondria, people understand it as the powerhouse of the cell. That is one thing that it does. It does so many more vital and crucial things, but it produces the energy, and the signals it needs to produce the energy properly and efficiently come from our light environment. So our light is actually much more of an upstream signal than our biochemistry and our food. So, I've shared this and it kind of resonates with some people, and people can understand a little bit better. But say you've got like a Ferrari, your body's a Ferrari and your mitochondria are the engines. You've got a whole bunch of engines, right?
Mm-hmm.
You obviously want to put the most premium fuel into that Ferrari to make it run the best that it can.
Mm-hmm.
But if your engine is broken, you can put all of the premium fuel you want into that Ferrari. It is not going to make that engine better. And that Ferrari is not going to run very well. So you have to fix the engine. So it's similar to you can put the best food into your body, but if your mitochondria are not running well, then it does not matter what food is going into the body.
Whoa. Is that the same with supplements, I imagine? People that have hundreds of dollars worth of supplements every month and they keep taking them, but it's not actually doing anything?
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's another problem. Yes, there's another huge problem with supplements. I don't know if I can just kind of go into this as a
Yeah,
side
please.
note. So we trying to think of how to start this. So our body is actually made of mostly water. People understand that, but what we're told is it's anywhere from 60 to 80% water by weight, by mass. But we're actually 99% water by molecular count. So 99 out of every 100 molecules in the body is water. So water is extremely important. We already know that. But so water is made up of 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. So there are 3 different types of hydrogens that are found on Earth. One of them we're not going to worry about, but there's one is the regular hydrogen that we know of. And then there's another one, which is considered a heavy hydrogen, and it's called deuterium. And the only difference is it has an extra, it's got a neutron. So hydrogen is the lightest element on the periodic table. Sorry for getting kind of sciencey, but there is a point,
love
and
it.
I'll explain it properly. But so hydrogen has 1 proton in the middle and 1 electron. Deuterium has a proton and a neutron, so it's got double the weight and double the size. It doesn't change the charge at all, but deuterium is found naturally in our water and therefore in our food, gets absorbed into our food. And it's necessary, but if we have too much of it, it can actually destroy our mitochondria. And the way it does that is our mitochondria have an extremely exquisite system of getting rid of deuterium so it's not inside of the mitochondria, because it will damage the mitochondria if it's inside. When we eat too much of it or drink too much of it, then it will get inside of the mitochondria. Now, the part where it causes the problems is the very last part where ATP is made. So most people might understand, or many people might understand, ATP is that molecule, again, we think of as the energy currency of the cell, but that's also under debate right now as well. But the way ATP is made, I'll just explain, is like a basketball going through a hoop. So the basketball is the proton, the hydrogen, and the hoop is the ATP motor. So the basketball, the hydrogen goes through nice and snug, like a basketball going through a hoop. That's how ATP is made. With deuterium, if deuterium gets in there, that would be like trying to get 2 basketballs through a hoop. So it's either going to get stuck or it's going to break the hoop. So it will break that motor. Or if it gets stuck, it will then cause a backlog of all of the things that are leading up to that basketball going through the hoop. And that whole backlog can cause a whole host of other problems as well. So the reason I'm bringing this up is supplements are loaded with deuterium.
All of them? Doesn't matter what kind?
That because of the processing that takes place, they are loaded with deuterium. So
Whoa.
that's also the same with processed foods. And that's something that people don't understand is part of the problem with processed foods. So again, to give yourself and your listeners more of an understanding, seawater at the equator is naturally found with 155 parts per million of deuterium. So a high level of deuterium would be considered 160, 165. Supplements have in the order of 200 to 250 parts per million of deuterium. Same with processed foods and same with those seed oils we are trying to avoid. So they really wreak havoc on the mitochondria. And as I said before, the mitochondria really are at the crux of our health.
I think you're blowing everyone's mind right now, and they're thinking about the hundreds of dollars of supplements that they're taking right now. What about something like, the primal foods trends? So we have people taking it's dehydrated meat organs. I guess that's still processed because we're dehydrating it. It's not in its like fresh natural form. Would that be considered processed? And would that be lumped in with a deuterium heavy supplement?
So what I would say to that, I guess, is how if it's done in a pill form as opposed to someone is dehydrating their own meat organ, because it depends on the processing that takes place,
Okay.
right? But it's also the amount. Like I don't want people to kind of go and just throw out every single thing that they have, because there
Yeah.
are some things that are necessary. And it's balance in the sense that you want to do the best that you can. We can't be uh, we can't be perfect. I don't want people to think they have to strive for perfection. It's really, I teach the clients that I work with, it's progress over perfection, and we can make things better, right? And
Yeah.
there's also ways to deplete deuterium in the body that we don't necessarily take advantage of or we don't know about. It's much easier in equatorial regions, and that's why there is a lot more deuterium, for example, in the water and then in the foods, because that water is used for the foods to grow. So then you've got a lot of deuterium in those tropical foods. For example, that's why
Mm.
us in the northern climates shouldn't be eating tropical grown foods because they're higher in deuterium, but we don't have the ways of depleting them, which a lot of them, one of the big ways is with strong UV light. So you live at the equator, you're under strong UV light, so you can handle more deuterium because you're in a place where you can deplete it easier. But if you're in more northern climates, then you have to actively say do saunas. There was a Swedish study done, I think, on sauna usage and the reduction in mortality from the higher daily sauna use. I think went from like once a week up to 7 days a week. And there was a 40% reduction in mortality rate with the 7 days a week of sauna use, whether it be infrared, dry saunas, because the sauna actually helps with depleting deuterium.
So it's our body's ability to detox sweat. So sun, sweating, breathing, exercise, those things help move things through. If you're able to do that more, are you then able to harness the positive effects of a supplement? Or is it still your belief that, like, are you able to get the good stuff of the supplement, but then shed the deuterium? Or is it your opinion that supplements just really aren't doing anything for you?
I personally try to make sure that the foundations of how the body works optimally are in place before anyone starts adding any
Mm.
supplements. And at this point in time, I would say most people actually don't understand the foundations of how your body can work. And most of the time, well, I shouldn't say most of the time, um, because it's hard. Our world, we're so inundated and bombarded with toxins from so many different angles. But
Yeah.
we really can move the needle in a huge way by implementing some small foundational practices that will allow our natural detoxification pathways to be working properly so that we don't have to do a huge amount of extra detoxing. We don't have to take a huge amount of extra supplements. If we do these things to get our body working how it's actually designed, and our body is not broken. That's one thing I know. One person I follow, and she's become a good friend, and I absolutely love her, Justine Stenger. She's out of Calgary, actually. For anyone that wants to follow her, it's at Justine Cellular Nutrition. But I love how she just repeats over and over again that it's not, or there's nothing ever wrong with our body. It is always the environment. It is always our environmental signals that our body is adapting to. So we just really have to give our body the proper signals for it to get back to its state where it will run efficiently. And yes, in the short term, initially, we might need a little more support, depending on where we are at in terms of disease state or symptom state, I should say.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to just call myself out here. When you told me about this, it was a long time ago, about the supplement thing, when I learned about deuterium, I believed you and I understood it. And then I kept taking them, even though if I look at like my history and the things that I'm trying to address, I'm still holding this false belief that there is a magic pill that can fix it. I have a lot of things that I take every month and they are not changing anything. And I've tried different things and I still take them and I still have this false belief. And I remember you saying something to me about supplements too, and even like with natural health. It's the same system. We're just switching products. We're still relying on a pill, and it might not be a pharmaceutical, right? But we still have this, oh, a pill is going to fix it. And I agreed with you, and I don't know why, like my same bad habits just like kept me here. I think at first it was like, well, I'll go through the jars first. I already paid for them. And then
Yeah.
I have since bought new ones. I don't know what I'm doing. It's at least worth the experiment. Like
Yeah.
let's stop everything for a month. Like, and I've been getting blood work done. A simple example, iron. My iron is not changing. Not with the primal supplements, not with the different kinds of iron supplements, nada. And what if all of those supplements were actually making me more tired? What if they were just weighing me down with more and more deuterium each and every day? So this is just, I'm outing myself, and I do some of the things that you teach as well, but I'm just outing myself that I'm going to now do a little purge of all the things, and we'll do a little experiment and I can follow up with the listeners. What happens if I stop taking all the things that really don't seem to be making a difference anyways?
And sometimes it is, and thank you for sharing that and being so honest and candid. But sometimes it is about taking things away as opposed to adding things.
Love that.
And there's a few other things that come to mind as you were sharing that, because we are all by design, and this is just how we have come into this earth, we are designed to be programmed, and our subconscious holds on to things very strongly. And something that we do and practice over and over again becomes a habit, and we just, it feels unsafe to not do it anymore. And
Yeah.
so that's just, one thing I would say, just to, in a sense, be gentle with yourself in that regard.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, yes, stopping things, but I think putting in place just a few, really just a few simple changes, along with maybe stopping the supplements that you're talking about, would benefit. Because if you're still going to be living under artificial lighting and not getting any natural light, or being exposed to artificial light at night, from computer screens, living with the Wi-Fi on, like those things, you might not necessarily see a difference by stopping the supplements, because you are still living under conditions that are detrimental to your mitochondria.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And another thing, if you're okay, I just wanted to touch on the iron thing that you were mentioning. So this is something, again, not that I don't want to to blame or criticize my colleagues because I was in the same boat before I started learning, unlearning and relearning. But I have been following, for listeners who want to go and look this person up, Morley Robbins, who's been studying, you know, did I mention Morley Robbins to you before? So
No.
the last 10 years more so, he's been studying iron, copper, and magnesium. And he is just blowing my mind because we do blood tests, right? For example, you talked about iron and your iron is low and whatever you're taking is not budging your iron. Well, you're testing, first of all, you're testing for iron in the blood. You're not testing for iron in the tissues or the test that you're getting. They're not testing for iron in the tissues. Most of us are depleted in copper because of agricultural practices. Like in the early 1920s or early 1900s, we used to get between 4 and 6 milligrams of copper a day in our diet. It was reduced over time to the 50s and 60s. And now I think the RDA says it's less than 1 milligram, and most people don't even get that in their diet daily.
Mhm.
And copper is a regulator of iron. So if you are low in copper, you cannot pull the iron out of your tissues. So you
Interesting.
might think you're low in iron because of the blood test,
Yeah.
but most of us are actually overloaded with iron because it's stuck in our tissues.
Another reason why the supplements might not be as effective as we think is we don't actually know what we actually need, like the precursors, and does your body take this form? And it starts getting really complicated. So we're spending lots of money, and it's not as easy as, oh, I'm low in this thing, I will take the pill that has this thing, problem solved.
And then it doesn't address the reason why you're low in that thing.
That's right. That's right. Well, talk about like shifting paradigms, right? Like even me knowing that that's false and then still clinging to it and still doing the thing. What was that like for you leaving medicine, leaving everything that you had been trained in, believed in? Was there a part of you that like wanted to fight for that for a little while? Like, no, 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 this, this is real. This is a thing that I need to stick with, because you just celebrated a big milestone officially. You officially burned the boats, we'll
Mhm.
say, with your past career. And I'm sure this wasn't a quick thing. You probably been thinking about this for a very long time. What was that like to break out of this paradigm and decide to leave and start over? Because there's, I'm scared of letting go of my supplements, right? It's like this little safety thing. That's not a big deal. What you did is a massive deal, and there's so many people afraid to let go of this life raft as the only thing they've ever known. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's it was a big deal. It was scary as shit, I have to say. I think when I left, because I stopped working in October of 2021, because in BC, that's when the mandates came in. I honestly didn't think that I would be gone long. I thought a few months, the system's going to crash and burn. They're going to have to ask everyone back because it was already a dumpster fire. Like it's would not be able to be sustainable. And as time went on and I saw things going down in flames and them, digging their heels in, I was like, holy crap. Like what went through my mind was they want this to happen. Right. And that was what was really what I had to wrap my head around.
Mm,
Just this idea of what was really going on in the world. And I kind of started going down obviously a bunch of different rabbit holes and just looking. It doesn't mean you have to believe everything that you read, right?
yep.
But be exposed to the information. And I remember thinking like, how could I go back to work after learning? Oh, okay. I didn't think I would be gone long because the system, the hospital was already a mess. We were short-staffed, and I just assumed it would be a few months and it would get worse and they'd have to ask everybody back. And as time went on and they dug their heels in and they weren't asking people back, at least in BC, they were in other provinces, I started to realize that I may not be asked back. And because I had time on my hands, I was obviously going down a bunch of different rabbit holes, just seeing what information was out there, not necessarily believing everything I was coming across, but I wanted to see what was being said and by who, because there are a lot of credible people out there speaking, giving different information than what we're being told by mainstream, and things that made sense to me. But it really was when I came across Dr. Jack Kruse that my mind was just completely blown. And I don't know, really, because what he was saying made sense. He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. He didn't necessarily come up with all of the information himself. And he says that he gives credit to the sources, but he put the pieces of the puzzle together and he explains that well to some people, maybe not to other people. But I guess I have this passion for learning and understanding. And this was a whole new world that opened up to me. So it's not that what I was taught was wrong, but it was so incomplete. And, one of Jack Kruse's favorite expressions is a half truth leads to a full lie. And so practicing kind of a half truth in the hospital made me feel like I was incongruent with myself, right? What I believed in, what to be true. And so I struggled with that within me, thinking, how would I be able to go back to work when I'm asked back, thinking I would be asked back at some point. And as you're aware, I'm not sure if the listeners are, because most people in British Columbia were not, but our mandates and emergency measures were in place for 3 years. They were just lifted this past July. So I would not have I was not able to go back for 3 years. And at that point, there's a whole bunch of other issues that go back with not having been in clinical practice for 3 years.
Which is so wild because, one, I just want to highlight, I love that you framed it this way. It's not that what you were taught was wrong, it's that it was incomplete. Because medicine does help people. Like there are people that need medicine, like 100%. So I love that part. But this piece about the mandates in effect for 3 years, you know, my distrust of public health and the medical care system will never be recovered,
Yeah.
not because of what happened in COVID, but because of what's happening today.
Yeah.
If at any point there was an honest look at what happened, an honest auditing, the NCI is the only one that did this. I could forget if public health said, whoa, we made a mistake,
Mm.
or we should never have done mandates, or it's helpful for some people, but others, like the cost benefit ratio doesn't make sense. If I call public health today, and I've done this recently, they're still telling me to give the what to like children. And I'm like, that is incorrect. And I actually videoed this call and I said, this is so terrifying, either that you actually don't know this, terrifying, or B, and you're telling me a lie right now.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening in our system right now. Carrying these mandates on for 3 years, that's a lie in and of itself.
And what else is happening in BC, which I'm not sure people in the rest of Canada, I'm sure the world don't know. There's a bill that's been in place and we have an election now, which I don't know. We still don't know the outcome of, even though voting has already taken place like a week ago. I think it was a week ago or maybe 2 weeks ago.
So suspicious, by the way.
Yeah. That if the same government stays in place, there's going to be a mass exodus of physicians and healthcare workers, because what is in place right now and was supporting my decision to actually let go of my license, which was the big kind of change that you had alluded to earlier, is that if as a healthcare worker, and it's not just a physician, a naturopath, chiropractor, anyone else, a massage dentist. If you speak to a patient or a member of the public and you give information that is outside of the lines of what public health wants you to share as far as information, you are subject to, for physicians, up to $500,000 in fines, 2 years jail time, and property seizure. So that is what is in place right now in British Columbia.
Unbelievable.
So that, I don't know how people think this is a free country, right? When something like that is actually in place. But again, most people actually don't even know that this is, most of the public here, when I talk to people, they have no clue. Many of the physicians have no clue. So, if I were to share, like I have to be careful how I share information, but now I'm doing it without a license. So it's not medical advice. So everything that I talk about is just purely for informational purposes only. It's not medical advice. It's not a medical treatment. It's not a medical cure or anything. It's just education. But I don't even know if me not having a license now would still subject me to that, because I am still considered a medical doctor in the eyes of the public. Right?
Right. Or now you're battling just new restrictions, censorship, like we talked prior to this podcast, depending on what we talk about, YouTube might slap medical misinformation on this and take it down depending on what we're talking about as well. So it's a different beast either way. But at least, censorship isn't jail time, isn't $500,000 in fines. Those are real consequences. I remember saying to my GP during COVID, I said, I could never trust your advice because I know the pressure that's on you right now. And he said, oh, there's no pressure. And I sent him back a screenshot of the Doctors and Surgeons College saying, if you even so much as recommend vitamin D, we will pull your license. And I was like, I've seen this. Don't tell me there's not pressure.
Yeah.
I know that how much money you guys are all indebted to. And this might honestly just be your opinion, your truthful, honest, in integrity opinion. But because of these systems that are threatening to pull your license or fine you $500,000, how could I ever trust that you're giving me truthful information under this kind of system? Now, let me play devil's advocate, Joe Rogan style. There has to be some regulation. There has to be some sort of guidelines, because if it were the Wild West, do whatever you feel like, do whatever you sense, I imagine there's also problems there. What's the line though? What's the boundary?
Well, I guess I would say to that is right now, the people who are making the policies and regulations are not actually the ones practicing, right? So when you have that layer of removal and lack of understanding, I think that causes problems. And one of the things that I'm following very closely, again, Jack Cruz is in the works of creating a decentralized medical system in El Salvador with the president. I think it's Said Bukele. And he's written a medical freedom law already that Bukele has implemented. And so, you just have to, I guess you'd have to make sure you are working with the right people to make the right policies and regulations, people who have morals, people who have ethics, right? People who have integrity and really want the best for the patients, because the patients include us. So yes, I would say that, but I think as well, what has happened, and there's so many blessings that have happened with COVID in terms of a sort of weeding out and sifting the population into different categories, for lack of a better way of saying it. But you know, the traditional medical system that's in place right now, I would say they have kicked out all of the moral, ethical, and doctors that have integrity. So those ones then going to set up a different system or working in a different way, I think the population, the public has more trust in them, because they did walk away from, you know, for example, I didn't know how the hell I was going to support my family. You
Right.
know, I walked away from financial stability, and that was one of the reasons I went into it. I knew that I would be stable. I didn't care about having a huge, you know, amount of money. I worked part-time so I could be home to raise my kids, because that
Yeah.
was the point for me in raising and having kids.
Yeah.
But stability, you know, and going into this lack of stability, I had to have faith, because I knew that it was wrong. I knew that I could not
Mm.
follow the mandates for myself and for my health and my family's health. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I knew it was not a decision that, you know, it wasn't a decision I made lightly, but it was definitely the most grounded, sound decision that I made.
Do you think there's anyone in the system trying to save the system? And is that even possible right now?
There definitely are people in the system wanting to save it. And that was a group of doctors I connected with right at the beginning, kind of wanting to fight. And we had lawsuit going and turned into a judicial review. I don't really know what the difference is, but I started to feel like I was getting pulled back into that realm of my divorce process in the legal system, which was awful. And I just had to step away, because I did not want to go back into that energetic space at all, because it didn't serve me one iota. And I was also contemplative about, you know, do I really want to fight to get back in? Like, do I really want to do that? And
Mm.
so I know that there are a lot of physicians and a lot of nurses who are still fighting to keep the system running, right? And to keep everybody in it, and to think that they can change it, which initially that was something I had thought about. But I think it's like the Titanic. Like, I think there's just
Mhm.
there's no way to change it from within. It's too big, and it's got too many constraints on it. I think something
Yeah.
new has to be built. I think that's the best. It's like renovating a house. When you start renovating a house, there's actually more problems than if you just built a new house.
Oh, for sure. My husband does, we have a carpentry company. He does not do renos usually. It's from, no, we're bulldozing this thing from the ground up. Well, and I'm of the belief that it's funny, people in the quote freedom community get really bossy about what other people should do.
Mhm.
I think we all have very unique roles in this. I think some people are meant to be a squawk box on the internet like me, and other people are meant to change things from the inside, whether that is politics, medicine, the education system. Some people are meant to start, like, leave and start something new, and some people are meant to stay. I do see a lot of people, though, staying who are aware of the problems, and they might say it's because I want to change it, but there's lots of people that are actually not doing anything about it, because you have that's a much harder position
Mhm.
than leaving, like you said, like building a new house, because you have this boot on top of you at all times. I remember being at an event, for example, and there was a nurse there that was very, very awake, knew she would never take this injection, and she was giving it to everybody else. And I was like blown away, and I said, "Why? Knowing what you know, believing what you believe." And
Mhm.
she's like, "Well, it's not my position to say anything, or that's not going to change anything." And I just felt such ick around that scenario. I'm
Mhm.
like, that's not you changing the system. That's you just keeping your job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would, for myself, sometimes I think about the things that I have done that I didn't know. You know, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
But I think about the things that I have done that I now, for example, I participated in giving anesthetics for ECTs, electroconvulsive therapy, when you do the shock therapy for some people who have psychiatric problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel horrible now that I participated in that. And I think about the harms that I have done unknowingly. But then if I were to go back, for example, and then do that, knowing what I'm doing, right? Knowing now that I was causing harm, and then going back and continuing to follow through with that, I don't know how I could reconcile that.
Which is so different, right? We're talking about the difference between knowing and not knowing. And we all do things all the time. Like looking back on I look at things that I've done in the past. Like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Like I would never do that now. But like you said, I love that where when you know better, you do better. That's all we can do as conscious, awake humans.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why I'm so excited, although it's sort of slow moving, that I am moving into, that I came across you and your community and your guidance, and forging kind of a new path and helping people with true healing. And all of the people that I have met, like I would never have met, and I would not have met had I not pushed myself out of my comfort zone into speaking publicly, speaking to crowds. Now it's the people are coming out of the woodwork saying, yes, I agree with you, or tell me more, or I don't have to go looking for it. People are coming to me when I kind of have pushed myself out of my comfort zone. So it excites me to do it more, even though it's still somewhat terrifying.
It is terrifying. Well, describe for us what it's like to be free. Like, what's it like to create a job that is in alignment with your values? And in terms of healing and what true healing looks like, what are those things that you're excited about sharing? What are the things that you're witnessing actually are working, the things that you feel really good about teaching right now?
So there's a few things, yeah, that I want to share about that. And I guess, everyone experiences stress, from depending on, everyone's level of stress is different, the reasons they're stressed and what it comes from. But what I would say, where I'm coming from and the stress that I experience now, I don't perceive it the same way. My body doesn't experience the stress the same way. And I feel that that is because the direction that I'm going in is everything about my body, mind, and spirit is a yes. And so, although there are things that are terrifying and things that are uncomfortable, the stress doesn't land in my body the same as it used to. And I think because of that clarity, that's what I experience.
Hmm.
Uh, and the learning, I've kind of rediscovered my passion for learning, because obviously I wouldn't have gone through all the years of schooling if I didn't like learning. But it did become sort of like a grind, and like, oh, I have to do this, and I have to study for this, and I have to do that, which you lose a little bit of steam and momentum and desire. But when it comes to something that you're truly passionate about, which I feel now I am, it's not something that I have to do. It's something that I want to do, that I get to do. And so it fuels me even more. And what I love about what's happening right now as well is what my children are witnessing. And so, my kids are 17 and actually almost 18 and 19. And, obviously all this stuff happened 4.5 years ago. Wow, 4.5 years ago. And there was a lot of turmoil and a lot of sort of angst and upheaval in the world, and in everyone's household and everyone's lives. And as the dust, I don't want to say settles, because there's always continual turmoil, but I would say more as the fog dissipates, you know, my kids are watching, right? The modeling is so much more powerful than what comes out of your mouth. And they see the transitions that I'm going through. They see the discomfort, and how I'm pushing myself. And actually, that's making me emotional as I talk about this. But some of the things that my children have said to me, I'm like, I I feel like, okay, my parenting job is done. Like, holy crap, I can't. I mean, obviously they're insightful kids, but I feel like I am now giving them the strength and the courage to follow their hearts, to follow their desires, and not be constrained by all of the systems that we have had in place, that we, still have some in place, but they really fuel me. They always have. And I had for a long time put them as a priority and neglected myself and put myself last. And it was before 2020 that I started to realize I had to put myself first, in order to prioritize them, right? That was the only way I could help them, was by helping myself first. And in turn, that was helping them. And so I'm glad I realized that before COVID, because that really made the decision simple for me, to walk away from my career. But what I'm doing now is I'm truly helping people with their health, and therefore my kids are watching. And so I don't have to harp on them about all these things to do with health, because they're listening to me talking to other people about it. They're hearing the stories and the changes that I'm seeing with other people. So now my son is in his second year of university, that's another story, but but he's there. um, he's studying engineering, and he's wearing his blue blocker glasses in front of his computer all the time without me being there having to ask him, because he's experienced headaches and eye strain when he doesn't use it. He's using his little red light panel, because he's surrounded by all of this blue light all the time, and indoors with a lack of infrared and red. So he's got the red light panel on all the time to balance that artificial lighting. He is taking the organ meat supplements, because my kids won't eat organ meats. So I've got that.
Yeah.
And my kids are also using these patches that, we can talk about also, I can just touch on, but that are something that I feel are a good transition to helping people who are still programmed, or holding on to that idea of, I need to take something, I need to do something for my health, rather than really starting with changing the lifestyle, which is the long term and the approach to take, because it's really about long-term lifestyle changes and habits. But some people have trouble with that transition, and I would say children, it's hard to get kids to do anything, right? And so, but my kids are actually taking on the habits that I couldn't tell them to do, but they're watching my life change, and the people that I'm surrounded by, their lives changing, the ones I'm working with. And so they're wanting to take on these habits. And another exciting thing too is, and this just honestly, it really, it's such a wonderful surprise, because my daughter, like I said, she's almost 18, she's in grade 12, but her friends who come over, they are talking like to her, they're telling her, oh, all these things your mom is doing, it's so cool. And they're following me they're following me on social media, and they're showing my information to their moms, and they're like, oh yeah, my mom wants to meet your mom, and she wants to know about all these things. And so that's also lends support, right, to kids, because they still are so influenced by their peers. But it's nice to see a younger generation caring also about their health.
Yeah.
I kind of went off on a tangent and answered the question or not, but
No, it's beautiful. And it's like a lot of the things that you're teaching right now, you're teaching them because you know that they're working. Because prior to discovering these like simple daily practices, regulating like light, you weren't sleeping, you weren't feeling well. When we first met, you were having trouble like thinking clearly, and the light has been the biggest healer in your life.
and so just to share with the audience that I was not a believer just by hearing the information, and even hearing it from Dr. Jack Cruz, who laid out the science in front of me, just like, the supplements, it just kind of, yeah, okay. And then I thought to myself, everything else I've tried has not worked. Like I was falling asleep while driving. Like that was how exhausted I was during the day. Excuse me, not at night even. And again, nothing was working. I implemented what he said, and literally it was just a few things. There are a lot more things that can be done, but getting up with the sunrise, seeing the light, the sunrise light with naked eyes, no glasses, no sunglasses, no contacts, right at sunrise time, even if it's just for a few minutes, getting as much as you can natural light during the day, blocking artificial light at night with blue blockers, like the orange ones, not these yellow ones. These are daytime ones. The orange ones block all of the blue. Literally within a week to 2 weeks, I had no energy slumps or like fatigue slumps during the day at all. I was wide awake. I had an abundance of energy, no naps. I'd already been off caffeine for a long time because I thought that had contributed to my sleep problems. And I hadn't had alcohol in 2 years again because it disrupts your sleep. I was trying to do everything to right my sleep and nothing was working. And it was literally that shift. It just, and it happened that quickly. And it's story after story after story with these changes. And I have a free community Facebook group that I share some information with. And I'm getting the same, like the feedback. People, they don't necessarily think that it's going to work. And I try to encourage them just to do the best that they can whenever they wake up. Like, again, progress over perfection. And I get, these responses and this feedback that, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm actually awake and I'm refreshed, and going outside and seeing the sunrise gives you as much energy, if not more, than drinking that cup of coffee, which you think is giving you energy, but it's actually stealing your energy in the long run. But
Mm-hmm. And these patches that you're talking about, how does that use the light to help heal people?
yeah, so that is a fascinating one, which I am just I'm so thrilled with, because it aligned perfectly with everything I was learning about light when they came, across my purview. It actually did take me about a year and a half to investigate, because I thought it was just the same thing as like a red light panel, but a patch. And so I didn't understand what it was until I started investigating this past, I guess it was March, April. And what it is these patches that it's phototherapy, which for anyone who doesn't understand phototherapy, it's using light to help with healing physical and mental problems. And there's over 6,000 studies in PubMed, which is the research repository on photobiomodulation. So it's not like an airy-fairy thing. It is a documented, validated science. The research is there. It's a type of phototherapy, but instead of using an external source of light, it uses the light that we already produce. So we produce light. And again, that's also a verified scientific, evidential, it's scientifically proven that we produce light. We produce infrared light, again, from our mitochondria. We also produce ultraviolet light, but for people who want to understand more, just think of that when you watch in movies, people use the nighttime or night vision goggles and they see the outline of someone that they can't see with their own eyes. That is infrared heat, but the infrared is equivalent to light. Like heat and light are the same. It's just the length of the wavelength of the frequency. So the patch reflects the light we emit back into the body to cause the biochemical changes that we want. And so the inventor of this company, LifeWave, David Schmidt, is brilliant. The company is 20 years old, but it's really taken off since 2019 because of what he has released in 2019. These patches that use our own light to basically activate our own stem cells. They activate a copper peptide, which activates our stem cells. And this copper peptide, again, there's 50 years of research in PubMed. So it is well known, well proven, well documented that this peptide, if anyone wants to look, it's called GHKCU. And it is the fountain of youth peptide because of the activation of stem cells, which is how our body regenerates broken and dead cells. So the timing of me coming across these patches was such that I jumped right in because I understood the science immediately because of what I'd been studying. There's nothing going into the body. There's no contraindications. There's no medication interaction. There's zero downside. The patches are non-transdermal, again, meaning nothing is entering the body. And my mom's health was declining. And so they were looking at surgery. She was looking to potentially have to have surgery. And I said, let's try these patches because what I had been hearing about, and she has heart failure, among other things. But within 2 weeks of starting the patches, she was starting to breathe better. She couldn't walk before without having to stop every 2 steps to catch her breath. Within 2 weeks, she was walking significantly faster, not short of breath. And within 3 weeks, she actually had to lower her thyroid medication because her
Whoa.
thyroid was starting to come back online. And so, yeah, now she's actually starting to lose a bit of weight, but that's not even like the half of what I've seen. I just started sharing because everyone around me was suffering with something. And I said, I don't know if this is going to work for you. Are you willing to try? Do you want to see? And the miracles I have seen are like nothing I have seen in my 30-year career in medicine. I'm telling
Wow.
you, it in front of my face as I put patches on people. But it makes sense now, again, for me, understanding the science of light and water in the body. Again, it's mind blowing. I don't even know how else to say it. It's just incredible.
That is incredible. I'm wearing mine right now. I've just started a couple of weeks ago, so I've been keeping track of like all the different things, all the different symptoms, while also making sure I'm not simultaneously filling myself with all the bad stuff that might just counteract the positive effects of these. But I love also that you always start with lifestyle, right? I know you help people a variety of different ways. You have some really cool treatments that you can do with people in-house. But you have these, like, let's first look at your light habits. Let's get you outside. How about you just go for a morning walk every day? Let's take away those expensive supplements, or like not think that you have to go out and buy another thing right now. Like, let's just start with the light.
Yeah.
I love that approach. And then when it's time for like optimization, we'll say, we have some other things that you can try too. But I love that you're starting just with these, like, just lifestyle, which you would hope every doctor would.
But they don't even know because it's just not what we're taught.
Yeah. Yeah. Rachel, this was so fascinating. I feel like we can do a whole episode like just on the patches, just on LifeWave. Maybe we'll do this later as I start to figure out how they work for me and I start to see like the science applied in my own day to day. But in the meantime, anyone's curious about like the work that you do, if they want to look into LifeWave, if they want to look into some of the services that you offer, or just learn from you. I know you're on social media, a variety of different places here, but where's home base? Where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, I would say my website. So my website is rachelmauricemd.com. And I have information on LifeWave there. And to connect with me, you can email me through my website. But I'm also, as you said, on social media. So Instagram, it's Rachel_Maurice_MD. And I'm also coming out with an app very soon, and I will have that on linked on my website as well. But I'm really excited about that app because there will be a free part you can download, and then I will be putting some programs on there as well to, if people want to dive deeper and do work in groups and have access to me live weekly. So, yeah.
I love that. A doctor in your pocket. Well, we just feel so lucky that you're in our community. And members, if you're listening to this right now, Rachel did an incredible workshop for us, all about light, and it was a deep dive into light. And we're all in the digital realm. we're all getting the effects of blue light 24/7. A lot of us were spending way too much time on a screen as we grow our online businesses. So if you haven't watched that workshop yet, that is in your community, definitely go back and check out that replay. It's going to change the game. It's going to help you continue to work in your business. It's going to help you keep your energy up instead of just slamming coffees all day long. I know everyone that was there live just absolutely loved that. There was a ton of good practical information that not only blew everybody's mind, but it was something that everyone was like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. That's all I have to do to feel better. Amazing. Really appreciate your time here today. We'll definitely have to bring you back. We'll make sure to link your website here in the show notes. And again, yeah, just thank you for telling us about your story and about how we can actually healing just with some really simple shifts.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great chatting with you.
Bye.
Been underground, now I aim for the sky. Don't quit now, you can last longer. All these wounds only making you stronger. Don't